Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Pat Layton, and I'm the Director of the Wood Utilization and Design Institute here at Clemson University. I'm joined today by co-presenter Greg Johnson. Greg is the principal of Johnson & Associates Consulting Services, a regulatory analysis and advocacy firm specializing in the development of codes and standards. Greg's a former building inspector for a major U.S. city and served on the International Code Council's Board of Directors for 7 years. We're glad you're with us today. Our webinar is entitled Supporting Mass Timber Buildings in the International Building Code. And today we'll share how to participate in the International Code Council's development process. At the end of this presentation, we will have time for questions. I'm going to ask you, if you can, to use the chat box to enter your questions. And we'll also give you some links at the end to where you can go and find a PDF of our presentation and a webinar sometime after tomorrow. Those will be up so that you can have those in your hands. So let's talk. Let me get back into my PowerPoint. Let's go over our agenda for today. We're going to overview mass timber and the development of the ICC Ad Hoc Committee Code. Then we'll be talking about the development process, the process participation, and then go through a step-by-step voting registration approach. Let's begin today by talking about and defining mass timbers as we use it in today's world. Hopefully you can see my cursor on my screen and will be able to follow around with me. Mass timber is composed of several types of engineered wood products. Examples are given here on this slide. The first example, which I'm circling now, is cross-laminated timber. Cross-laminated timber is basically boards that are laid down in a perpendicular manner with each layer. They can be 3, 5, 7, or 9 layers thick. Panels of this type of wood can be anywhere from 8 to 10 feet wide and 40 to 60 foot long if necessary, or they can be cut on a CNC machine to whatever size is needed. The idea behind this is that the panels come with all holes, all grooves, and everything cut into the panels, delivered to the site, and pulled off of a truck and lowered or raised by a crane into position and used in the structural component. Nail laminated timber, which is here, is a very early form of this type of panel product. It is only strong in one dimension. However, it's been used in old mills here in my part of the world for many years, and it has today been used in buildings across the country. One of the newest buildings using this is the T3 building in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Next to it here is, please mute yourself if you're coming on, is dowel laminated timber. This again is the same concept. It's a 2x set on edge. Holes are drilled through and dowels are driven through the material, again, strength in one direction. Glulam beams and glulam columns. Glulam is also a very older type of wood that's been used for many years. And then we have the structural composite lumber, including paralams or parallel strand lumber and LVL's laminated veneer lumber. All of these are now in the category of mass timber. Cross-laminated timber was specifically recognized in the 2015 Building Code with some additional language in the 2018 Building Code. There is also a national design standard available for CLT. Use of mass timber currently follows the allowable sizes for all wood buildings. So if you're looking at building codes and your building code has mass timber or CLT in it, they go under current building code sizes, areas, and other standards. However, mass timber offers unique opportunities to be good beyond, or should I say, above today's heights allowed in the building codes. Mass timber buildings have been built already that are 10 to 18 stories tall and are in use around the world. And at least one building has already broken ground that will be more than 10 stories tall in the United States, in Portland, Oregon. Why is this happening? Well, mass timber offers a strength and tradition and resilience that's comparable to traditional tall building materials while providing environmental and other benefits. It's not a new idea, this mass timber idea. Europe began 20 years ago making larger mass timber in the form of CLT and have been building for some time. In fact, a taller building was built in 2009 in London. We are just beginning this process in the U.S., and hence the need for having something about these taller buildings into our building code system. While wood, one of the questions that always comes up with, well, it'll burn. Well, the idea is that while wood is combustible, it has great fire resistance, mainly because it chars. That char insulates the spread of fire and resists damage to wood behind the char layer. Wood, therefore, continues to have strength even as it burns, where other materials will be, as they heat up, their strength may be decimated by that heat, whereas wood retains its strength until during that because of the char. Mass timber wall assemblies have been evaluated and can provide a 3-hour rated firewall assemblies. In the construction process, mass timber such as CLT can be safer to use. It can be built very safely. Some studies have shown that it is more cost effective, and if you're interested in those studies, there are several webinars that are available on Woodworks. They can be less noisy because there's not as much operations going on the site because the panels come in already pre-designed, so there's no sawing or hammering. You put them together with a large automated screw systems. And they require fewer laborers. And again, there are some studies on this that you can find on the Woodworks website that on their webinar systems. As we looked at the future of mass timber, it became clear that we needed to be able to, within the building code, be able to allow for mass timber buildings higher than the current code allows. Therefore, a tall wood building project was commissioned by the ICC, and a committee was appointed. In December 2015, the ICC board established the ICC Committee on Tall Wood Buildings. If you could please mute your phones, it would be very helpful. Thank you. Mute your screens. The committee was to explore the science of tall wood buildings and to investigate the feasibility of and develop tall wood building code changes. The ICC recognized the need for a consensus committee and comprised its stakeholders of representatives from the building construction material industries, including non-wood industries, building and fire officials, architects and engineers, fire protection experts, and other construction-related stakeholders. Their work was concluded earlier this year and presented to the ICC. We'll cover that work in a few minutes. First, let's take a look at the overall code development process. The ICC accepted code changes at the end of last year from this ad hoc committee. The code changes then went into a committee action hearing. The committee action hearing results were posted, and now we're seeing, at this moment in time, as we record this webinar, public comments being submitted. The comment period ends on July 16th. Those public comments will be then taken to an open hearing in Richmond, Virginia, October 23rd through the 31st, October 23rd through the 31st. Approximately 2 weeks after the public comment hearing, An online governmental consensus vote will be held, and that will last for about 2 weeks. So today, as we go through this next portion of the seminar, the webinar, we'll be talking about validating the voters who can take part in that online governmental consensus vote. But let's look back at what the committee's work has done. The committee action hearing that took the ad hoc committee's report happened in Columbus, Ohio from April 15th through the 23rd. The committee heard nearly 2 hours of testimony on the 14 proposals that were presented. The vast majority that attended that hearing were in favor of the proposals. All of the relevant code proposals passed by wide margins, with 13 proposals being approved at a 13-2 vote and 1 approved at a 14-1 vote. So what were those proposals? Here are the 14 proposals. In general, they do 3 major things. They modify previous definitions within Type 4 to establish subsets of Type 4, with heavy timber being one subset and different types of mass timber being the other types of Type 4 construction. They lay out new fire safety requirements for mass timber, and they detail the allowable size of mass timber buildings in terms of height, number of stories, and areas. Bear with me for a few seconds while I stop sharing my screen, and Greg Johnson will lead us through the next portion of the webinar. Greg, it's going to be time for you to go.
Thank you, Pat. Just give me a minute, folks, and I will share my screen with you. All right, and let me get the program in front of you. And I'm going to talk to you about how we make sure that we get our voting representatives designated to participate in the online governmental voting process. And for anybody who does want to attend the public comment hearings in Richmond, Virginia, this would be qualify you for that step as well. Realistically, though, it's going to be the online portion of the voting where folks are going to be able to have the most effect. So, in the International Code Council's code development process, the members of the organization are the ones who, if you will, own the vote. And that means these are government agencies. Departments or agencies engaged in the administration, formulation, implementation, or enforcement of laws, ordinances, rules, regulations relating to public health, safety, and welfare. This is a key paragraph. This essentially describes what qualifies a government agency to be a member of the ICC entitled to designating voting representatives. So the primary voting representative of a jurisdiction, meaning a government agency that is a member of the ICC, designates individuals that are employed by the jurisdiction to exercise its voting rights. And that's what we're going to walk through, is how that happens. ICC governmental member voting representatives are assigned on a geographic basis, meaning if your jurisdiction is of a certain size, you're allotted a certain number of voting representatives. Smaller jurisdictions, up to 50,000 population, are entitled to 4 voting representatives. Moderately sized ones, 50,000 to 150,000 people, are allotted 8 voting representatives. And if you have over 150,000 citizens in your jurisdiction, or you represent that many people in your jurisdiction, you are entitled up to 12 voting representatives. If you are a state or federal agency, you automatically are entitled to 12 votes for your unit or your department, your government agency, because the population you represent would be the entirety of your state or the entirety of your in the case of federal agencies, the entirety of the federal government, the population of the United States. The voting limitation that does apply is that one person gets one vote. So, in other words, even if you're a federal agency of over 150,000, one person does not get to cast 12 votes. Okay, it would have to be 12 individuals that cast the vote on behalf of that agency. Now, this is nuanced, though, because the ICC's bylaws do not prohibit directed voting. So, in other words, if you're the director or manager of that unit of government and you've got 12 designated voters in your unit of government, the ICC permits you, or it's acceptable for you as the manager of that unit of government, to direct all of the voters to vote in any given direction. So an individual can't vote more than once, but an individual who has the managerial authority within their own unit of government can direct the voting of other representatives of the government. Key dates for ICC participation this year. There's a deadline of September 23rd to designate your governmental member voting representatives. Now, it's important to understand you do not have to wait to designate these folks, these governmental member voting representatives. That can happen today. As long as your unit of government, your agency, has joined the ICC and has been identified as entitled to governmental voting benefits, you can currently designate your member representatives. And I would encourage anybody who's in that position to designate them as soon as possible. Because if we run into some kind of a hitch, or if some kind of problem comes out, which I don't anticipate, but if it does happen, there will be plenty of opportunity for us to work through the problem and make sure that folks who are qualified to vote in the process have the opportunity to do so. The ICC requires that governmental member voting representatives be validated through an online tool that they have. The link is provided, and I think Pat mentioned or will be mentioning that this PowerPoint is going to be available at the Clemson website. So this information will be there. But primary representatives, that's the lead representative for the jurisdiction, goes to ICCSave.org/EVDS to designate their member representatives. There's a short questionnaire there, and we're going to walk through what that questionnaire is. It ties directly to the bylaws. After you designate your voting representatives, the ICC will review the information and validate your voting representatives, or if they have a question, they'll contact you and ask you to resolve the question. Pretty straight ahead stuff. Everybody needs to use the electronic voter validation system. So this is the only way that you get to designate your voting representatives. Upcoming opportunities to actually vote by the voting representatives will again be at the public comment hearings in Richmond, Virginia in October, if you choose to attend, or in the online governmental consensus voting process following the public comment hearing, which is going to start about a week to two after the public comment hearing and will last for 2 weeks per the dates that Pat already had on the screen. This is just a flavor of the kind of participation that the association has seen in the past. These numbers, the 2016 online governmental consensus vote, show how many representatives participated in the process on some given items. There were 577 code change proposals in the process. The maximum votes cast on a single proposal was 780, and the minimum number of votes on a proposal were 158. So every vote does matter. These are not big numbers when you think of your ability to influence the outcome of the voting. So in such a small pool of voters, every vote really does matter. We anticipate that at the end of the process, we hope to be in a position of trying to achieve a vote of 50% plus one, a simple majority on our issues. We were very successful at the committee action hearings in obtaining our results. The committee supported pretty much everything that we wanted to do. And what that means is if what the committee supported survives the public comment hearing process, what goes out for balloting to the online voters will mean that our position only needs a 50% plus one simple majority to carry the day. So we're in a good position right now. Obviously, there's the debate part of the process at the public comment hearing that we still need to get through, but we're in a good position in that regard. Critical dates. Again, we've already talked about this, but we have to have the governmental member voting representatives designated by September 23rd. That's an absolute deadline. If you are not designated before then or by that date, you will not be able to participate in the online governmental consensus vote. Okay, so how this works is the primary representatives for the jurisdiction. Typically, that's the person who was the person who actually joined the ICC, went through the process of becoming a member. That primary representative has the ability or the authority to designate governmental member voting representatives. The way you would do that would be either to sign into your account on the ICC website or to register for an account on the ICC website. And I think you probably already have an account as a primary voting representative. So I think that was probably part of the process of joining. But if not, then you'll need to register for an account. The way to get there is go to ICC Home and then go to My ICC. Okay, this is again after you've signed in or registered. Sign in is right up here on the home page. Okay, once you get to the My ICC page, if you are the primary voting representative for your jurisdiction, your unit of government, you go to voter validation. Select voter validation. Okay, and we'll get to this page where you need to validate, and there's a validate link, and on this screen, it's off our screen. And there's going to be a short 2-question survey to be answered. We'll take a look at those. And as you validate, you have the opportunity to, in the form, add a representative or remove a representative, edit the information around a representative. When you are filling out the questionnaire, you identify your organization, the name of your unit of government, you enter the voter information, and complete the answers to the 2 questions that help qualify you. As you see, we talked a little earlier about the ICC bylaws requiring that all voters be employees or officials of the government member or departments of the governmental member, provided that each of the designated voting representatives are an employee or public official actively engaged either full or part-time in the administration, formulation, implementation, or enforcement of laws, ordinances, rules, or regulations relating to the public health, safety, and welfare. Okay, so the questions themselves are specific to these provisions of the ICC bylaws. They will ask you, when you're designating a voting representative, whether or not that person administers the laws, ordinance, rules, regulations, formulates them, implements them, enforces them. Okay, that's going to be question one. Question two is going to be, what's the relationship of that voting representative to the jurisdiction? They could be a paid employee. They could be a third-party contractor, because the ICC does not. The ICC is not concerned with the contractual relationship between the people that are employed, in the broader sense of the word, to administer regulations. So that it's perfectly acceptable for local government or a unit of government to use a contractor to administer these regulations. So you could be a third-party contractor of the governmental member. You could be an elected official of the governmental member and be designated as a voting representative. And there's also the category of other. And if you use the category of other, they'll want you to specify. I think that's the category that's more likely to get a phone call from the ICC or some communication from the ICC for an explanation of why you've categorized this potential voter as an other. But it does not close the door to that designation. It just is a request for additional information. Okay, so you answered the two questions. In this case, I see we have Arnold Schwarzenegger, was the assistant building official in the state of California. I thought he had a better job than that, but apparently he was the assistant building official. Okay, after a voter is validated or revalidated, they're designated as a voting representative, and your 2018 voting representatives will be shown on the screen at that time after you've added them. Okay. You will be emailed confirmation of your voting representative's eligibility. If you do not receive that, we will have to make an inquiry again with the IC as to why that is not the case. All right. Now, you can go in and check your voting representative status as well. Same thing, sign into your ICC account. Go to the My ICC page, okay, double check. Yeah, it's your member name, it should be, that's the function of the website. And go to the member directory. From the ICC, My ICC page, member directory is on the menu at the left. If you go to the member directory, okay, and you look up your jurisdiction, and the way to do that is you would be a government, so you'd go to the government button. It says government and corporate members, okay, and you would enter your organization's name. In this case, it's FEMA that's being reflected. Where you're located, your state, that kind of thing. And you would search for your unit of government. Now, it's a database. So if you don't see your unit of government pop up in the search result, it could be that you've gone under the wrong category, that if this drop-down menu opened, this governmental member greater than 150,000. There are actually, I think, 3 governmental members greater than 150,000. One is for a 1-year membership, one's for a 2-year membership, one's for a 3-year membership. So what I'm saying is that if your membership does not pop up when you use this search function, it's probably just that the right search criteria were not used. Just search it again. You should be able to find it. At the worst case scenario, you search your entire state, and you'll get a whole list of all of the jurisdictions in that state. So you search for your jurisdiction, and when it comes up, okay, it will identify the folks who are your governmental member voting representatives. Names that are in blue are validated for the current code development cycle, and they're going to be able to vote this fall on the mass timber changes, either at the public comment hearing or in the online governmental consensus voting process. If names are in red, they are not current, and that means they are not entitled to vote. So it's going to be important, if those are names that should be for folks carrying a vote, that we're going to have to get that straightened out. Which is why, again, I'm saying that we don't have to wait till September. Right now, today, we can verify whether or not people have been designated to vote, or we can designate people and then check in a day or two to make sure that their names are in blue on the ICC's member database to make sure that they're eligible for voting. Okay, and I think we're back to questions, so I'm going to stop sharing my monitor and pass it back to Pat.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg. So I do have a first question for you. One, if you become a member as validated, do you have to set up your own account then within the ICC? Did Arnold have to go log in and set up his own account and get his own password? Is that something our employees, if we're a government agency, would have to do, or do they just go sign in some other format?
Individuals will have to, the primary representative for the jurisdiction, the person who gets to designate all of the other voters, will have an account for sure, okay? The individual voters will have to sign up and have an account, but they won't have to worry about going in and designating voters. And in fact, they probably will not have a link that would permit that. For example, when I go into the ICC member database and go through the steps to the My ICC page, I'm not offered the opportunity to designate voters because I'm not the primary representative of a government agency. But I have my own ICC account. The CDP access process is the online governmental voting process for the ICC. You have to have an account and a password to log into that to exercise the vote. So, yeah, the individuals will have to have credentials to log on and participate in the voting process.
Wonderful. Okay, with that, I just want to add before we start taking questions, because I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can unmute everyone. And you can also use the chat box, and then I can read the chat box. I'd like to let everyone know that www.clemson.edu/WUD, which is the home website for Clemson's Wood Utilization and Design Institute, should have a link up sometime tomorrow for this presentation, a PDF version of the presentation, and to the recorded webinar. So if you would like to view this in person as a PDF or as or to rewatch the webinar, please go to that location. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at that moment, and I will ask anyone that has a question to please join us, and I'm going to unmute you all so that you can do that yourself, or you can type a question in the chat box. Are there any other questions from any of our participants? Greg, any final comments?
I guess, repetition's a good thing in this context. If you haven't done so already, I would encourage folks to not wait. Go ahead and get into the system, designate your voting representatives, because if there is some hiccup in the process, the sooner we identify it, the quicker that we will get it corrected. And the other thing I want to stress is that the ICC will assist to the extent they can to make sure that qualified voters are able to vote. They want people who are eligible to participate in the process to be capable of participating in the process. So there will be a lot of resources available to help folks sort their way through this. But let's get going with it so that we aren't having hiccups in the second and third week of September when we've got a hard deadline staring at us.
Thanks, Greg. I'd just like to encourage all of you who are listening today to please take time, get your validated voters out there and get them ready to vote. Make sure they know something about what the vote is about so that they can vote appropriately when we get to that point in time in about November 1. Stay tuned for other updates and on the issues of the building codes that are going to be coming through from the ad hoc committee on tall wood buildings. This is an important subject and opens up a new era of building in the United States. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone. I'm going to stop recording now. Hopefully, I got to stop the recording. Hang on.